Okay.
Nobody,
Okay.
if
All right. Check
nobody
it out.
should be.
All right, folks. Good evening. If you're in Liberia, good afternoon. If you're on the east coast of these United States, welcome to this very special um exclusive edition of the Costa Show. It is an exclusive interview with one of the leading friends of Liberia. Boaga, I'm waiting for confirmation from the radio stations that are relaying us. I'm waiting for definitive confirmation for the radio
Okay.
station.
Yeah. All two on already. All two radio stations are
Don't say
on.
all two, Boaga. Call the names and the frequencies of the radio stations, please.
Okay. So we have Sky FM 107.1 on Broad Street, and then we have D15, that Radio Busher 98.1 there in Busher Island. So we are on live and clear.
Beautiful. Thank you very, very much. Folks, there you have it. You can go ahead and share the show. Share the link. We're on two radio stations, well, three. We will not call the name of the third radio station, but it's in Bon County. We are on D15, and we're also on Sky 107.1. This is a special, one of the most anticipated interviews we've done in less than 30 seconds. We already hit 1,000. Less than 2 minutes, we've already hit 2,000 views. Less than 2 minutes, 2,000 views. Well, I want also give me information on the website, the other platforms, the MyTuner, Tuning, and the other platforms. Give me update real time. Just write them out to me, Boaga. I will announce them. Get the feedback. I mean, get the current viewing from the website, the MyTuner and Tuning, and let me have them. Dr. Alan White will be our guest on today's exclusive 1 hour interview with him about a number of things we've been hearing that are happening in Washington, D.C. regarding Liberia. Frantic efforts, concerted efforts by friends of Liberia in these United States of America. And Dr. White is one of such people. He's been involved with Liberia and West Africa for a long time, a major advocate, a mover and shaker in the United States, bringing justice and closure for crimes committed to the people of the West African region, specifically in Sierra Leone and currently in Liberia, in order to bring closure and justice and accountability. Dr. White will join us at 4:10. That is in 7 minutes' time. Dr. Alan White will join in 7 minutes' time. Wanted to come on, build the anticipation, and Dr. Alan White will join us. We have been relayed live, crystal clear. My team has just definitively confirmed. We've been relayed on 3 radio stations as we speak. D15 98.1 is relaying us on Bourgeois Island, D15 98.1, and Sky FM 107.1 is also relaying the Costa Show, this very exclusive and special edition that is aimed specifically at hearing from the horse's mouth, the people who are involved in helping to bring justice and accountability and closure to the Liberian people. It is the issue of war crimes will be a preeminent, one of the key subjects to be discussed here. The efforts to bring about accountability and transparency, the wave of suspicious murders that we are witnessing in Liberia currently will be discussed here. The things we've heard, some of which have been divulged from platforms such as mine, prominently the war crimes? Are there going to be, the sanctions, asset freeze, visa restrictions? Are these things in the works? Will there indeed be a congressional hearing on Liberia? The
mm,
likes of influential Congressman Chris Smith and his colleagues in Congress, are they working behind the clock? Behind the scenes, and now they're about to come on the scene to do a congressional hearing on Liberia. These are some of the things we will ask Dr. Alan White. We will also ask him about what benefits, if any, would Liberia accrue from prosecuting perpetrators or persons who committed war crimes and crimes against humanity. Those are some of the questions we will ask Dr. White. Now, a few days
mm,
ago, we announced 2 hotline numbers for tips, to solicit tips from people who have substantial or substantive pieces of information that could aid in the capture and prosecution of Prince Johnson for the alleged murder of an American missionary named Lena Jury, and also information on corruption and suspicious murders under the Weah government. We provided those lines, those hotline numbers, and we will be asking Dr. Alan White, is it true? Is it legitimate? Is the hotline service real? Is it legitimate? Are there real individuals involved behind these things? So those are the questions so far. So we've been on for 5 minutes. We've already hit 3,300 live people. But I'm waiting for the data on the website and the other platforms. I don't know what you guys are waiting for. I'm waiting for it right now. Send it to me. I'm waiting for the data. So we are on 3 radio stations, one in Banga, Bone County, and Sky FM 107.1 and D15 98.1. They are beaming this special edition right now. In 3 minutes, Dr. Alan White will join us. We'll be asking him some questions. Dr. White, what is the role in West Africa? Is it just
mm.
trying to capture bad guys and bring them to justice? Or have you been involved in Liberia in some other ways? Of course, we will ask him how he's been instrumental in helping mobilize financial resources for Liberia and all of that, because there are some people who think that Dr. Alan White is just a man who wants to grab bad people and put them in jail. But we will ask him other questions regarding his role in Liberia, specifically mobilizing resources, pulling strings, making things happen in DC for the Liberian people, as a friend of Liberia, as I call Dr. Alan White. Now, Dr. Alan White, and we will ask him, are there sanctions coming, Dr. White? Are there visa restrictions coming? A few weeks ago, we saw a statement emanating from the United States Embassy near Monrovia, in which it stated very clearly, and I will quote verbatim, word for word. It said, and I quote, "A number of Liberians in government have recently been designated as corrupt actors by the United States Department of State and the United States Department of the Treasury." Designated. That word,
Mm,
designated. And so we'll
mm.
be asking Dr. Alan White, is it true? Are Liberian government officials going to be designated? Are their assets going to be freezed? Are they going to be designated by the Office of Foreign Assets Control under the Department of the Treasury? Is it true that there are going to be visa restrictions? These are some of the things we'll be asking Dr. Alan White. He will be with us very, very shortly. In 1 to 2 minutes from now, Dr. Alan White will join us live, and he will speak to the Liberian people on a Liberian platform. So, folks, fasten your seatbelts. It is going to be a fantastic, fantastic interview. This man has many decades of experience under his belt, working in the United States government, working in the international justice system, fighting for to curb global crimes and bring global crime and global justice. And those are the things Dr. Alan White has been involved with. So shortly, he will join us very, very shortly. Any moment from now, we've got already a total of 4,000 plus people watching on Facebook and YouTube alone.
Yeah,
And
YouTube is carrying like 200 persons.
Yeah, YouTube alone has 200 plus people, and Facebook has 3,900 people. And any moment now, Dr. White will join us. Any moment now, Dr. Alan White will join us. And any moment now, be said.
Yeah, let me just welcome our folks in Bon County. Those that are
Okay,
just
hold
joining
on,
us, want to say
hold on,
welcome.
hold on. Folks, we have with us, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to announce the arrival of Dr. Alan White, a real friend of Liberia, as I call him, a friend of the people, a man who has dedicated decades of his life seeking to bring bad men and women to justice, to bring closure and accountability in places where people were maimed, murdered, raped, tortured. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Alan White. Dr. White, it's our pleasure to have you, sir.
Hey, good evening, Henry. Thank you for inviting me, and and all of your listeners worldwide. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
It is our pleasure, sir. We are currently beaming on 3 radio stations across Liberia, and thousands of people watching and listening via the internet as well. Dr. White, today's interview is one of the most anticipated I have done in my 10 years during this business, and I can tell why. There's a lot of tension. But, sir, we would like to open this interview by asking you to kindly do us the pleasure of introducing yourself fully so that people know exactly and intrinsically who Dr. Alan White is.
Well, thank you so much. I've been in the criminal justice field for far too long, going on 5 decades. Let me turn this. Is that down? Is that okay?
You are fantastic, sir.
Okay. My last 3 years, I was on loan from the U.S. Department of Defense, where I was a federal law enforcement executive, to become the chief of investigations for the UN-backed War Crimes Tribunal Special Court for Sierra Leone. And I had never experienced international justice at that level, and I'd never seen the horrible atrocities committed by mankind. And I made a commitment when I got to Sierra Leone, and I saw the victims that I saw, not only in Sierra Leone, but also in Liberia, that I would pursue justice till the very end. Unfortunately, at the time, my mandate was to work in Sierra Leone. However, shortly after the indictments occurred and Charles Taylor was forced into exile, I immediately went over with a team and we started conducting investigations throughout Liberia to gather evidence and other information pertinent to our trials. And although we were able to successfully pursue and prosecute Charles Taylor, our mandate didn't extend itself to Liberia. The reason why we were able to successfully prosecute Charles Taylor is, number one, he created the Revolutionary United Front, and he aided and abetted them for years, as everyone knows. So he was convicted, he had command responsibility. But unfortunately, the people of Liberia was not able to attain justice at that time. So I made a personal vow that I would be back and we would continue that quest for justice for Liberia. And that quest continues today. And we're making, I think, significant progress. And with the people's help, I honestly believe that this can be actualized and it can come to pass.
Thank you so much, Dr. White. Dr. White, let me ask you a question. You said with the people's help. What exactly can and should the Liberian people do to show up your efforts?
Well, this isn't just my efforts. This is the quest of the Liberian people and a follow-up to the TRC Act. If you'll remember, the TRC, which was created in May of 2005 by the TRC Act and the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, required the establishment of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And upon the completion of its work, all of the recommendations, all of them, were to be enacted into law, period. So that is the law. So this is something that it's not just a quest of mine, it's a quest for the Liberian people. They wanted justice, they sought justice. Now it's up to the people to demand that the government implement the requirements of the TRC, which includes the establishment of the War and Economic Crime Court. So it's up to the people to demand their legislators to enforce the TRC Act and implement the recommendations. And I can get to that in a little bit about how the court should be set up. But in response to your question, it's up to the people to follow up what they wanted and what they demanded.
Thank you so much, Dr. White. Now, let me ask a question. The detractors and the people who oppose, for whatever reasons, the establishment of a War and Economic Crimes Court often say, if we were to do such a thing now, it could very well plunge the country back into chaos. They want to cast that aspersion of cynicism and to sort of scare people. And what do you say to such people? It's drawing from your Sierra Leone experience.
What I can say is that was exactly what I heard from the people that opposed it in Sierra Leone. We were told repeatedly by those that were involved in the commission of war crimes that they would repeat and sink the country back into civil war. What I can tell you is the rule of law is far more powerful than the barrel of a gun. And we heard that as soon as we started our work, that we would upend the country. It would return into civil conflict, civil war would erupt, and nothing further from the truth had happened. There was a gentleman there by the name of Chief Hinga Norman, if you may remember him.
Very well.
He was in charge of the Civil Defense Force, and he had over 10,000 commodores. Do you remember the commodores, the local fighters? Those were his. That's a sizable group of people. 10,000 fighters that we were warned that if we pursued him, they would come after him and they would plunge the country back into civil war. He was also the Minister of Internal Security, which meant he had complete control over the entire security apparatus. The police, the national intelligence agencies, all of those that you would think that if they supported him, they would be there if in fact he was arrested. Well, I can tell you on March 10th, 2003, when I launched Operation Justice and I arrested everybody publicly at that time, we arrested Hinga Norman, and within 55 minutes, we had at least 10 of the 13 suspects rounded up, put on a helicopter, and they were flown down to Bonth Island. And when the people found out that Hinga Norman was arrested, they were dancing in the street, and the rest is history.
Where were his 10,000 men?
Nobody came. Nobody came.
Beautiful, sir. Very, very good. Now, sir, we've had pushbacks with, politicians, successive administrations when it comes to establishing a War and Economic Crimes Court. Today, if the WEA administration were to say to you and other actors who are pushing for this to happen, that they are prepared now to give the support for the establishment of the War and Economic Crimes Court, and to have the Liberian Senate, which, by the way, was recently condemned by the United States government for what they did, which we will get into later, would you and international actors pushing for this to happen, would you be satisfied with a process led by George Weah? Would that please you, sir?
Well, it's not a question of pleasing me, but based on the last 3+ years of demonstrated performance, it doesn't appear that the government is serious about establishing this war crimes court, despite the fact that the campaign that was run was based on establishing the war crimes court. And if you'll remember, in September of 2019, when he appeared before the United Nations General Assembly, for over 20 minutes of his speech, he asked the international community for their support to set up the war crimes court. And as soon as he returned to Liberia and was asked and questioned by the press about that, he denied that he ever brought that up. So here's what I would say. This would be my suggestion, is the TRC Act authorizes and requires that this be established. And it also requires the government not only to set it up, but to seek international community and international support for the establishment of this tribunal. So I would use the Sierra Leone model, because it's exactly, in my opinion, what needs to be done in Liberia. What President Kaba did for Sierra Leone, and it took courage, and I understand that, but he did it. He sent a letter to the Secretary General requesting the establishment and support for a war crimes court in Sierra Leone. He did not have the capacity and he did not have the funding. So the Secretary General, in concert with the other member states, agreed to support that. And they created an international hybrid So to avoid the conflict of interest, mitigate corruption, it was agreed that this would be an international hybrid court, which meant it had international jurisdiction and it also had national jurisdiction. And it would be staffed primarily by internationals to avoid any corruption, to mitigate risk of conflict of interest, and to make sure that it was done transparently. So that would be the model that I would suggest. And I would suggest that President Weah immediately send a letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations requesting that the court be established and request funding and other necessary support to include perhaps security. What we did have a United Nations mission that was there, but eventually they left. So we still had our own security that was established. So those are things that can be done to protect the court and protect the people that work with the court. But I think that that is the model. And then thirdly, because we all know Liberia went from number 20 to number 5 as the 5th most corrupt country on the continent of Africa.
That's a huge drop.
So nobody, in my opinion, from the government should be in charge of this. Somebody from civil society with a legal background that is highly regarded and highly respected in Liberia should be the point person for this to interact with the international community. And I think that that would be the model that would be used. The statute also needs to make sure that there is a treaty between the United Nations and the government of Liberia, and also the majority of the senior positions of the court for the greater good of the Liberian people should be appointed by the Secretary General, the prosecutor, the registrar, and the majority of the court members on the trial chambers and also on the appeals court. This will relieve the pressure from anybody inside the country from being subject to coercion, threats, bribery, or any other concerns that could happen and call into question the integrity of the court. So it can be done, but the president needs to start it. If he does not, the people, and I would encourage them to do this anyway, because the legislators are the ones that report and work for the people of Liberia. It's already been passed. The legislative body could enact this immediately. All it has to be done is sent to the president. Now, there needs to be modifications to this economic and war crimes court statute, as I mentioned. But once those revisions are done, it could be sent to the president. If he does not want the court and he vetoes it, then it comes back to the legislature under the TRC Act. They can override the president and it can be implemented. But the legislators, both in the House and the Senate, need to hear from their people.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alan White. Folks, if you're just joining us, we have about 6,000 people on Facebook and YouTube alone watching. We've got 3 radio stations in Liberia. This is an exclusive interview with a friend of Liberia and a champion of international criminal justice and accountability, Dr. Alan White. He's our guest. Dr. White, a few days ago, I announced a hotline service that's currently set up in Washington, D.C., run by some friends of Liberia called the Liberian U.S. Support Group. And there were some detractors said that is not legitimate. Can you confirm that that hotline service soliciting tips on the alleged murder of American missionary Linda Jury by Prince Johnson and tips on suspicious murders and public corruption under the Weah government? Can you confirm that that hotline service is legitimate and is indeed real?
Well, from what I know of it, it seems to be legitimate, and we would encourage information to come in because at the end, all of that information has to be vetted. But there are some serious allegations that were made about Linda Jury, who was an American, and most people didn't understand her as being an American when she was over there in the 1990s. She was somebody that came from South Africa and elsewhere to provide civil society support during the war. And she was allegedly executed for objecting to some of the violence that was ongoing there. So there's been some good information. There's also been some good information about the assassination attempt that was made against me back in May of 2004, where I was alerted early on when I was staying at Mamba Point.
The Mamba Hotel. Mm-hmm.
At Mamba Point Hotel in May of 2004, I was contacted and said, Doc, you got to get out of there immediately. They're coming to kill you tonight. So I left, and I was able to go to another location that was safe and secure. Unfortunately, there was a U.S. Department of Defense delegation that was led by a fellow senior executive, and his name was John Offrey. And since I had vacated that room in that hotel, they assigned him my room. And unfortunately, late in the night, there was allegations, not allegations because it actually happened.
It did happen.
There was an individual that dropped down through the ceiling tiles and stabbed him to death with an 18-inch bayonet. And I was contacted the next morning because I was still in country, but at another location. And they sought to find out if I was okay. And they were glad to hear I was okay. And I asked why. And they said, well, the room that you were staying in, that you vacated last night, there was another American that was in that room and he was stabbed to death. And that was John Offrey. And unfortunately, at that time, Judy Bryant was the chairman. Okay. And he did not like our efforts at all over there. So from what I understood, this investigation was swept under the carpet and turned into a robbery burglary that had gone bad. Now, this hotline has developed new information of people that's in the current administration that was involved in this assassination attempt and killing.
Sir, did you say this hotline service, from announcing the numbers, you've received tips on the assassination attempt against you, which unfortunately claimed the life of Colonel John Offrey? Did you say that? And did you also just say you've received tips pointing fingers at current George Weah government administration officials for being involved in attempting to assassinate you? Is that what you just said, sir?
That's the information that was conveyed to me.
Wow. Wow. Well, folks, there you have it. Dr. Alan White is our guest. So the hotline service works, and you heard him say they've received tons of tips. The phone lines are ringing off the hook, and they're getting information on a number of things, including current George Weah government officials involved. Now, so one of the things on the hotline service, it talks about tips on corruption under the current administration and suspicious killings. All that information that's being collected and to be vetted and substantiated, would that information be used to bring to book the current perpetrators under the Weah administration? Should we expect that, sir?
Well, it depends on what the allegations are and if they're proved. But if they are, they could certainly be used for sanction purposes and those types of things. It doesn't matter where the information comes from. It doesn't have to all be resided in Liberia or all resided here. But if you have good, actionable intelligence and information that's vetted and can be proven, that would be very, very valuable for policy and decision makers back here in the United States while they're dealing with Liberia, whether it resulted in a criminal prosecution or global Magnitsky Act sanction.
Thank you so much. Speaking of the global Magnitsky sanctions, the global Magnitsky Act, a few weeks ago, we watched a virtual hearing opening session, which was attended by a number of congressmen, including influential Congressman Chris Smith, a good friend of Liberia, who, by the way, during the Ebola crisis, helped to mobilize millions of US dollars to help Liberia when we were in a very dire situation. Congressman Smith said, and I quote, "Liberia has a special relationship with the United States, and the current government is a kleptocratic administration, and the current president has been stealing from the day he became president. Liberian people are suffering, and more needs to be done." And he said more needs to be done after he mentioned Senator Vine Sherman, who was recently sanctioned. Now, we're hearing talk of possible sanctions and visa restrictions. Is this really in the works, Dr. White?
Well, it's clear that the U.S. is closely monitoring what's going on in Liberia. And I'm not at liberty, nor do I have inside information as to who would be sanctioned, who wouldn't be sanctioned. But I do know that this is a very powerful tool, and they are looking at it very, very closely and looking at the events over there. So it's a very powerful tool, and it's something that is not used lightly, but when it is, it's substantiated. And I know it's my understanding they do have additional information, and certainly I'm reasonably certain that there will be more to follow. I can't say when, but certainly they're very aware of what's going on in Liberia.
You are reasonably certain that there will be more to follow, and that more means more sanctions. That's what you mean, sir.
Conceivably, yes.
Thank you very much, sir. Dr. Alan White, choosing his words very carefully, as I expect, but he said he is reasonably certain that more sanctions will follow. So Vonnie Sherman is not the only victim here, caught up in American dragnet for his actions, bribing the judiciary. More victims to come. Thank you very much, sir. Another question I have to ask you, sir. We're hearing about an upcoming possible congressional hearing on Liberia. The last time I remember one was held was during the crisis when Samuel K. Doe was in power, and now former President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was one of those who testified. Is it true that in the next few weeks, a congressional subcommittee on Africa will announce congressional hearing on Liberia?
Well, there's certainly some discussion on hearings on Liberia. I can't give you the exact date, but there's a real interest in doing that, and I think you'll see that in the near term.
Thank you very much, sir. Again, Dr. White just confirmed that a congressional hearing is possible and is coming up, and we were here. And so now, sir, a couple of years ago, you said that George Weah, now president of Liberia, then standing bearer of the CDC, was in talks with Charles Taylor. And you were very concerned about that. I watched your interview on the VOA, by the way, when you said that. Why were you concerned with George Weah being in communication and contact with now jailed former President Charles Taylor?
Well, number one, he's a convicted war criminal, and anybody running for president that apparently is in communication with a convicted war criminal who is supposed to remain out of any political involvement in Liberia, that was number one. That was a violation of the terms of his sentencing. And anybody running for president, why would you affiliate yourself with a convicted war criminal?
That is true. Dr. White, I watched an interview of you back in 2012 in which you said you felt married to the efforts to bring Charles Taylor and other war criminals to book. And that interview was quite extensive. And in that interview, you talked about something I had only heard whispers of the instrumental role you played in helping former President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, just when she had gotten elected in December and made her first trip to DC, in helping fix a meeting for her with Congressman Chris Smith, Congressman Frank Rudolph Wolf, who was then chair of the Appropriations Committee, and Congressman Ed Royce. And she was made to commit to ask President Obasanjo to turn Charles Taylor over for prosecution, and in exchange, she would be given financial support, which did indeed happen. She received the first tranche of $6 million and the second tranche of $45 million, a total of $50 million. And you fixed that meeting for Mrs. Sirleaf through, of course, the instrumentality of her lobbyist, Reva Levinson. Do you care to touch on that a little bit? Because you've been helping Liberia on other fronts other than just trying to bring justice. The first money, U.S. money that came to Liberia was made possible through your instrumentality. Please share some light on that for us, please.
Well, there was some contact made, as you rightly point out, and I know there's a video out there, because very few people really knew what happened behind the scenes. But Congressman Wolf, who was one of the biggest supporters of the special court, as well as Congressman Smith and Congressman Royce, were scheduled to have a meeting. But unfortunately, Congressman Wolf was very careful who he met. He tried not to set a precedence of meeting heads of state, whether elected or duly elected or actual sitting presidents. So at the time, since I knew Congressman Wolf very well, very closely, I was contacted to see if I could arrange for a meeting with him and President-elect Ellen Sirleaf at the time, because she was leaving town the next day. She had to get back for the inauguration back in Liberia. And at the time, he did not want to meet, despite efforts to meet him. And I said the only way that I would even pursue asking him is if I had assurances from the president-elect that she, in fact, would request the formal transfer of Charles Taylor. And if she wouldn't agree to those terms, I wouldn't even meet with her. So she did. So I met her over at the Senate side. We discussed it. She gave me a commitment that she would, in fact, once she became inaugurated, that would be one of her first courses of action, was to formally request the surrender or transfer and arrest of Charles Taylor. Because if you remember, Obasanjo said that he would turn over Charles Taylor to Liberia government if they requested it. And so I went to the National Transitional Legislative Assembly, and we got that through the House. Unfortunately, Obasanjo changed his mind, and he said it had to be a duly elected government. So he moved the goalpost on us. So we were able to facilitate a meeting with Congressman Wolf, and the very next day. And the reason why he was willing to meet with her was that he got a commitment from me, and he had to hear from her that she would have to formally request the surrender of Charles Taylor. And the main reason, he was a little unique. He was a very staunch steward of the taxpayers' money, and he did not want to give money to a country like Liberia, knowing that there was still a threat out there that could cause further destruction. Because Charles Taylor, if you remember, always said, "God willing, I'll be back."
He did say that.
We never forgot that. So he wanted to make sure that if in fact he committed to meeting with her, that she was going to honor that request. And in fact, she did. And as a result of that, Congressman Frank Wolf was very generous to Liberia. She did what she said she was going to do. He was brought to book. Not only him, but his son a week later. We were able to arrest two Taylors within a week. And
Chucky Taylor.
That's Chucky Taylor coming to the U.S. So she lived up to what she said she was going to do at that point. Unfortunately, we never realized the establishment of the War Crimes and Economic Crimes Court. But at least for securing Charles Taylor, where he was transferred, arrested, and prosecuted by the special court, she met that obligation.
Very, 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 very good, Doc. There is this policy, sort of a policy position called SLAM for short, Strengthening Liberia Anti-Corruption Mechanism. Do you care to elaborate on that protocol, that philosophy, SLAM?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think it's one that could work right now under the current regime. But technically, it would be something very similar to the U.S. system, where you strengthen Liberia's anti-corruption mechanisms. You pursue criminal cases, civil cases, and administrative action against people that are involved in criminal corruption. The majority of most government expenditures are in contracts, and major procurement contracts is where a lot of corruption exists.
Precisely.
So when you're pursuing this type of, we called it the coordination of remedies, where you're pursuing criminal, civil, and administrative sanctions against those involved, government employees, companies, individuals that defraud the government, and government officials that are corrupt, receiving bribes and kickbacks. Those are all types of things that we pursue. Unfortunately, I think that'll have to wait for another time, but that's the spirit and intent of strengthening Liberia's anti-corruption mechanisms.
Thank you so much, folks. You are watching and listening to an exclusive interview with Dr. Alan White, a friend of Liberia. He's just dropped some bombshells. I heard him say, because of those hotline numbers, they've received some very, very substantial tips leading to folks currently in this administration who attempted to have him assassinated back in Liberia, which unfortunately led to the assassination of another American operative in the person of the late John Offrey. He was a colonel in the U.S. Army, I believe. And that assassination was targeted at Dr. Alan White, who is here, by the way. And we thank God his life was spared. which of course is unfortunate that another American colleague of his was lost. Dr. White, what are the benefits, if any, when and if indeed, I believe when is a matter of time now, when we grab and prosecute all of the people involved in bringing the war and causing mayhem in the country? What benefits does the country stand to accrue, the people of the country?
Well, there's many. First of all, reestablishing the rule of law for any republic is imperative. If you don't have the rule of law, your country is not a viable country. Also, just as in the case of Sierra Leone, once these people were brought to justice, they were held accountable, the country could finally heal itself. They could reconcile with what happened. Certainly not everybody, but certainly the senior leaders that were involved in the commission of these atrocities were brought to justice. So the country could heal. They started establishing and reestablishing the rule of law. When that starts happening, foreign direct investment comes to the country. And what's unique and special is the relationship that America has with Liberia. I can't tell you how many companies would love to come to a country, particularly one that we have such close ties to, if they knew that the rule of law existed and that a contract could be enforced. Not one that was awarded today and could be awarded to somebody else tomorrow for the highest bidder. So there's so many benefits that would arise from that. And there are people that are still suffering. And we all know that Africa has oral history. And there's been a lot of information that's been passed on to some of the younger people through the oral history and oral tradition of telling the stories of what happened to them. Liberia has never attained justice like Sierra Leone did. Sierra Leone, although it's not perfect, it's moving on, it's developing.
It is.
They are moving on, and think about it, they were a neighboring country that were destitute a couple decades ago. Now look at them. So that's what Liberia can look forward to, reestablishing the rule of law, healing as a nation, moving on, and making sure that this never happens again by holding people accountable.
Thank you very much, Dr. White. A few days ago, the Liberian Senate held its leadership elections. Senator Prince Johnson, notorious warlord, as described by the United States Embassy press release, was elected chairman on the very important Defense and Intelligence Committee. That prompted outrage clearly in a rather non-diplomatically nuanced press statement, which condemned Senator Johnson's election to that position. And of course, the Americans are very concerned and very disturbed. And the continuation of Varney Sherman in his role as chairman on the Senate Committee on Judiciary, and the very judiciary that the Americans slammed him with a sanction for bribing is the very judiciary that Varney Sherman chairs in the Senate. Do you think such a strongly worded statement is something that helps to reinforce efforts and help justify and motivate and incentivize efforts here in DC to bring the hammer down on the bad people in Liberia, sir?
Well, it certainly brought a high level of visibility to the issue. And this just reinforces my point that the U.S. government and certainly people over here are watching very closely as to what's going on in Liberia.
Wow. Wow. Sir, what do you think if you were to advise George Weah? Now, we know he's not a fan of yours, and we know that, but if you were to offer him any free advice right now, considering all the bad reports, the latest report coming out of the United States State Department on Liberia, which litanizes suspicious murders and police brutality and official corruption and a whole number of things. If you were to advise George Weah right now, what key pieces of advice would you, sir, offer to Mr. Weah?
Well, it's very difficult if you're very deeply involved in what's going on over there. And it's really not for me to decide. It's up to the Liberian people. But as far as the War Crimes Court and Economic Crime Court, the advice I gave earlier tonight, write the President or write the Secretary General of the United Nations, requesting the immediate assistance and establishment of the War Crimes and Economic Crime Court, seek financial assistance, and seek support in bringing international staff to staff that. That would be the first thing. If he was serious about rectifying and bringing accountability and the rule of law, I think that would go a long way for the people of Liberia.
That's very good, sir. Very good advice. Sir, Mr. Weah has a delegation of senior government officials, his chief of staff, the minister of state, his minister of finance, all people very close with him, are currently in the United States. And from what we hear, they're trying to basically seek audience with just about anybody who would grant them a meeting. But it seems from what we're hearing that they're not, there aren't people who are just taking meetings with them. What do you think a delegation from Liberia, with all of what has been reported by the Americans, what do you think a delegation here for a few days or a week or two could accomplish?
Well, it's unfortunate, but it seems like there has been little, if any, accomplished during this visit. The American people, and particularly the American government, is very aware of what is going on. And so I will let what didn't happen speak for itself.
I like that. Well, you heard Dr. White. I asked him, I'm going to reiterate, Doc, please, let me regurgitate my own words. I asked Dr. White whether the current Liberian government delegation in the U.S. would accomplish much. He said he will let what wasn't accomplished speak for itself. In other words, well, nothing happened, period. Now, Dr. Alan White, we're not going to keep you too long. We have just a few more minutes with you. Is there anything you would like to say to us that we already haven't asked you, sir?
Look, the Liberian people have their future and their own destiny. And it's not my role to necessarily influence, but I've had Liberian people for the last 18 years reach out to me and ask for my support in reestablishing the rule of law, accountability, and justice. And I've continued to do that. And I will, and there's been many others that are involved and are willing to do it. But if they want justice, they already have the mechanism in place. The law requires the establishment of this War and Economic Crimes Court. It's already there. All the people have to do is demand their elected leaders enact this legislation. As I mentioned, it needs to be changed. It needs to have an international hybrid component. We have to have international people, but the tribunal would be set up in the country, just like Sierra Leone, where the conflict occurred. The people will see justice. They'll get to see it every day. They'll get to experience it, and it'll be in a transparent manner. But those are some things that the people, if they want justice, and I know it's a very tenuous situation over there, but we all have to think about what we want. And it's a grassroots effort. And that's what I've been told repeatedly. If there's a grassroots effort for this tribunal, there will be international support. And I can tell you that from my own experience and dialogue with people in the U.S., as well as other international components.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alan White. It is indeed a grassroots support. This is the first time we've actually struck 7,000 people watching live, many tens of thousands listening via the radio station and on the other online platforms. This is by far the most listened to, most watched interview that I've done. To me, it bears testament to the fact that Liberians are really indeed interested in justice and accountability, because as you rightly put it, in order for the country to move forward, we must heal. We must be able to have closure so we can focus and redirect our energy and our focus on moving the country forward and not being distracted by the effects of the culture of impunity, where the likes of Prince Johnson would be threatening the people instead of being remorseful. Linda Jury, this American missionary, in the hotline number, the voice prompt says that the U.S. government seeks to have him brought to the U.S. and prosecuted under U.S. jurisdiction. So whether or not a war crimes court on Liberia happens, the Americans are not going to stop trying to lay hands on Prince Johnson to prosecute him. Is that so, sir?
Well, certainly these are the allegations. They would need to be investigated, and we would need to find out what legal options are available. But as a result of this hotline, this information is starting to come out with some more granularity, more detail as to what's happened, which will give the U.S. authorities a much clearer picture on what they want to do, both investigatively and prosecutively.
Dr. Alan White, thank you so much. And this has been an incredible opportunity. The Liberian people appreciate you for all of your efforts in helping to bring justice and accountability and end the culture of impunity, and so that the country can move forward. We appreciate you, we support you, and on behalf of the Council of Patriots, the pressure group which I had, I will speak with my people so that we can mobilize that grassroots support you talk about. But I'm going to ask you a question, Doc. One of the problems we face in our country is that whenever we try to exercise our constitutional right to mobilize the people, as we did on June 7th and on January 6th, respectively, the government clamps down using violence and all that kind of stuff. Can we have the support of our international friends, people such as yourself, people such as Congressman Chris Smith, that statement he issued just before the December 30th protest, which was moved to the 6th? Can we rely on the support of our American friends if we stood up to mobilize this grassroots support in order to show up your efforts for the War and Economic Crimes Code and for justice against what's happening in the country today? Can we rely on you to support us?
Well, you can certainly rely on my support, and there are many people on Capitol Hill and certainly in the U.S. government. They want to see a grassroots movement. They don't want to see a dictated court from America. But if this is truly what the people of Liberia want, just as we were there for Sierra Leone, we'll be there for Liberia. So it's up to the people what they want to do. And you mentioned it very pointedly. It's a constitutional right to petition the government and to peacefully assemble. And that's the key, peacefully assemble. But this is something that's already passed into law. It should have been enacted. So this is something that the people wanted, they got. Now it's up to them to encourage their legislators to move forward. And to that extent, I would like to commend Senator Darius Dillon and Yeka Kaluba, because they've at least been out front on this. And I know it's been at great personal risk, but there are others like them that need the courage to step forward and do what the people want them to do. So now it's up to the people to insist that their representatives and senators follow through on what the law requires.
Let me ask my co-host Bwaka, is there anything you would like to ask Dr. White before we part company with him?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. White, for being with us here today. For me, I just want to ask you for a favor for we, the Liberian people, because we have been here and we are going through a lot of things. We here at the Costa Show would really love if you could help us bring Senator Chris Smith. At least we can take an hour with him here on our show, please. If you could help us with that.
Representative Chris Smith.
Well, my suggestion is make a formal request, and I'll be happy to follow up. But I would have it come from you guys. Make a formal request to him.
I would certainly send a formal request. I know how to do it, and I will have you make it happen for us.
Thank you so much.
Dr.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Folks, there you have it. And that's a good point you made, Bwaka. You made a very good point about bringing on Congressman Chris Smith, a very powerful man, a very good friend of Liberia. I will make the request. I will send a letter to Congressman Smith, and I will ask Dr. White to make it happen. And we will bring Congressman Chris Smith on. I'm sure he would love to come on the Costa Show. Folks, there you have it. I'm Henry Costa. Bwaka Kamara is my co-host there in Liberia. Many thousands. Bwaka, give me the data from the web. We reached Senator Darius Dillon. Dr. White just commended you. Dr. Alan White just commended Senator Darius Dillon, and my brother Yeke Kaluba. So the Americans are watching. Darius DeLong, you just received a commendation from Dr. White. And Yeke Koluba, you just received a commendation from Dr. White. The Americans are watching. The Americans are watching. I want to say this. I want to thank the radio stations that relayed us. All the radio stations, Sky FM, even though we paid them, but we want to thank them anyway. I want to thank them. Sky FM 107.1. But I'm waiting for that data from the online. I also want to thank D15 98.1, and I want to thank that radio station there in Banga that relayed us. And I will be appearing on Spoon Talk at 5 p.m. or 5:45 or 5 p.m. To discuss this conversation that's been held. We've broken a record here today. We reached 7,200 views on Facebook alone. That's a new record. The last time we broke a record was when we interviewed former Vice President Joseph Yoman Boakai. We reached 5,000. Today we reached 7,200 views. 7,200 views today. And that is excluding Boakai. I'm waiting for the data. I want to announce it before we go.
Okay, just your WhatsApp, your messenger. George just send you the breakdown.
I want to announce the data of the people who are watching via. I'm waiting for it. I can't see, but why you can't send it to WhatsApp? That's easy. Send it to WhatsApp
already.
Okay. Oh, good. Well, I'm told Hot TV relay as well. Thanks to the Hot FM and TV family for relaying. Okay, George, just send me the data. Let me see the data. George, hold on. George, I don't mean the data for YouTube, man. I'm talking about the data from the online, George.
He said the online is carrying like 5,000 persons.
Wow. Jesus Christ. All right, good. The online 5,000 people. And yes. So, folks, thank you very, very much. And this is how we're going to bring it to an end. We want to thank everyone, Senator Dillon, for helping to arrange the relay on D15. I want to thank you all for this. And God bless you all. Justice will come. You heard Dr. White. When I asked him whether the hotline service is correct, he said the hotline was able to give them information on the people who tried to murder him all those years ago in Liberia, in which the American colonel was murdered. And he said some of those people are currently in the George Weah administration. Dr. White also said that the delegation here would not accomplish anything. Dr. White said the Liberian delegation here in the United States, headed by Nathaniel McGill and Samuel Twe, will not accomplish anything. He said that. He said they will not accomplish anything. Dr. White also said that when I asked him what sanctions are coming, Magnitsky sanctions and visa restrictions, Dr. White said he is reasonably certain. Look up that phrase, reasonably certain that the sanctions are coming very soon. When I asked Dr. Alan White, Dr. White, is there going to be a congressional hearing on Liberia, as I announced some time ago? Dr. White said, yes, it is in the works, and it will be announced very, very soon. That is what Dr. Alan White said. Folks, this is a record-breaking interview, and of course, this is fantastic. Thank you all so much. Have yourselves a wonderful, blessed evening, and look forward to seeing me on Spoon Talk, where we're going to move the traffic and we're going to discuss it. Have yourself a wonderful evening, and you guys be safe.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to you and the crew. Thanks to Eduardo. Thanks to George. Thanks to Anthony. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to Sylvester Tevez now and everybody who helped to make this interview possible. Thank you, guys. I love you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.